Hello, everyone. I'm Nini, project manager from Academy of Digital Industries, and welcome to our graphic design masterclass. And we are really excited to see you. And thanks for joining us. And we truly believe that this 1 hour masterclass will be very insightful for you. And now let me start with a short, brief intro about our academy. Our Academy of Digital Industries is educational platform that is built around the workshops and masterclasses, and we are providing workshops in 4 directions, like we have School of Design, School of Marketing, School of Business, and School of Development. So we have alumni more than 20,000 people around the world, and by joining our academy, you will have a great chance to become the part of our great community. And today, as you already know, we are introducing our graphic design masterclass with a very insightful and interesting topic, typography survival masterclass. And now let me also present our mentor, Chris Allen, our art director and designer and industry expert and creative professional who worked at top creative and ad agencies of the world. So he will lead the masterclass today, but not only the masterclass, he will be the mentor of our graphic design workshops. And now let me shortly tell you about our graphic design courses. Our graphic design courses are open for everyone. It means that our academy has no entry barriers. So no matter your educational background or working experience, you can join our graphic design courses, and you can build own portfolio that will stand out in the industry field. And from March, you can join our graphic design short courses and join our creative journey with Chris Allen and with our academy. I will also add a small note, and then we can also already start with the masterclass. By the end of the masterclass topic, you will have a Q&A part. So feel free to share your thoughts, your questions, and we're open to respond to you. And now, Chris, I think that we can start with your part. Thank you once again for joining us.
Cool. Thanks, Nini. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining. Great stuff. Right. I was going to share a screen. So I've obviously got a presentation to go through you. So not only are we looking at some cool stuff, but also got a couple of interactive demos and a bit of a live interactive game that you can all join in wherever you are. So let me just start sharing my screen. Right, so you should all be able to see a great big blue screen with typography written on it. Please shout if you cannot see that. Okay, cool. Right.
Can't see it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Yes, please do shout as we go through if anything goes wrong or anything happens at all. Okay. So I'm going to do a quick introduction onto the masterclass, and then, as Nini said, a Q&A at the end. So before we get into all the cool stuff, just a couple of slides just to kind of introduce the context of things. So it's a full series of 10 workshops and provides a really comprehensive understanding of key principles of graphic design, along with learning actual practical skills that you can start being a designer yourselves. And that goes from generating original ideas through to more the nitty-gritty of learning how to use key Adobe design software. And it doesn't matter if you've never designed anything before. So even if you feel you didn't do much art at school, it doesn't really matter to learn what we're going to be learning. So all these skills will be taught, including how to come up with ideas, which we'll get to later on in this presentation. And you'll be designing actually 2 real projects for yourselves. one digital and one print, and you'll leave with professional standard visuals that you can then use as part of an online portfolio. Okay, so before we get into it, let's start with a really simple question. What is graphic design anyway? Yes, broadly speaking, it's defined as the communication of a message or idea using any combination of type, colors, shapes, photography, and illustration. So how you as a designer use those elements, you might use one of them, two of them, all of them, and how you employ them, and what aesthetic and styling decisions you make. That's your role as a designer. And again, more on that later, the process. And it's all around us. So think, from the design of the cereal packet you might have for breakfast, the logo on your coffee cup, the posters on the tube in your commute, and even the presentation you're watching now. At some point, everything like that, like whether it's on paper or screen, has been touched by a graphic designer. And here are just some of the things that you can work on as a designer: posters, ads, magazines, TV ads, UX, which is user experience design with websites, film titles, branding, logos, social media, anything. Get the idea. And also, with those two projects I talked about a minute ago, there will be set projects, just like you will learn how to answer a brief, but also they will have some flexibility. So if any of you say, no, I'm really, really interested in web design, they will allow you to go down more that road and explore that kind of media, or whatever media you choose, if that's something you already bring with you a definite interest in any particular media. So all these things that you could possibly design, what opportunities are there as a professional designer? So you could work for yourself. You could have your own design, IamMeTheDesigner.com website. You could have your own clients working directly for brands and people who want stuff designed. You can work remotely or hybrid. Hybrid meaning, if you don't know, some days at home, some days in an office. Freelance. So we all know what freelance is. It's quite similar to, I suppose, remotely and hybrid, but you would go in, you'd get hired usually through an agent to go into companies and work on specific projects, which usually have a specific time period. And nowadays, there's loads of online services such as Fiverr, Upwork, Juno, you've probably heard of. Again, so there's a whole masses of projects posted on there, ranging from a real spread of budget sizes as well. Or you might want to work for a creative agency. So notice I don't even say design agency. So within the creative agency, you have design-specific agencies, or an advertising agency, PR agency, a social media agency, film and TV. There's a lot nowadays. There's so much crossover. For example, if you're in a big ad agency and they're doing a big ad campaign, they don't just get paid to do the TV ad. They would then have to show how that ad works on a poster design, on social media design, and there'll be a whole design team in that ad agency creating the designs. That's just one example. You could work in a business or in a brand, so in-house, if you like. So say you might have a brand you absolutely love, I don't know, Nike, whoever it is. You always dreamt of working for Nike. Well, they will have their own in-house design department, of course. Or maybe some of you are already in a business and there's kind of ongoing need for design, like social media posts or help with logos or brochures, leaflets, all the stuff that a business needs on a daily basis. And if a larger company, they'll have a marketing department. And in that marketing department, there's usually a design team. And also, obviously, really popular nowadays is startups, being entrepreneurial. So you might be part of a startup team. So you might be a designer. They might have a technical guy, chief technical officer. So you might want to form part of a founding team, and you're the designer. It's quite good. I'm sure there's others, but one that jumped to mind was a website called workinstartups.com, and that posts a whole range of jobs like that. Okay, so just giving you an idea, you probably get the idea. It's a big world. There's lots of opportunities depending on how you want it to fit into your life. Okay, so that was the intro. Any questions at all on the intro so far? Any questions on the course? Cool. Right. Okay. So what we're looking at today, the evolution of type and its technologies. It's not too heavy going. The reason we're looking at that is that the world we live in now, say we design on computers, usually Macs using Adobe, and that's the technology we have now. But actually type goes back 4,000 years, and there's a whole technological development over that time, and that influences type, design, art, culture, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Essential terminologies and techniques, of course, and that's where we'll have a couple of live demos for you to take part in. Expressive typography, that's basically just showing you a bunch of really cool stuff, some inspirational designs of how you can use typography creatively. And hey, check the typo, that's good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, excellent. And the creative process, that's basically giving you a summary overview of how the creative process works, both in terms of coming up with ideas, but also if you are working for a client or working in a company, working in an agency, a little bit of an introduction of how it actually works in the real world. Okay, so here we go. Let's begin. Typography. So the world we live in today, isn't it? Faced with infinite choice and infinite possibilities. Where do you start? You open up any program on your computer or iPad, usually have some, Word or whatever it is, you'll have a range of typefaces to choose from. So where do you actually start? If you're faced with a blank screen, what typeface do I choose? How do I go about thinking about how to use it? So, for example, look, top right, 7, the movie 7 from the 90s, I believe, just really distorted, distressed, animated, sort of quite cool type. Down from there is a section from Harper's Bazaar using really elegant serif type, when I'll explain what that is in a moment. Bottom right, again, you may take this for granted. The signage that we in Britain's road signage, that certainly didn't happen by accident. Yes, that was designed in the 1960s with a very, very clear brief. It must be as legible as possible from as great a distance as possible. So if you pay attention, look closely, you see the letters are actually quite far apart. That's all to do with legibility from a distance. All these things are really carefully considered. By contrast, at the bottom there, in the middle, is hand brushed typography. So there, that's image and story about a jazz musician playing a double bass, I believe. So it's really using the painted typography to, represent the energy, what's going on. And to the left of that, Taxis, done by a guy called Alan Kitchen. He uses letterpress and woodblock printing, so you can see the kind of distressed nature of the letter forms there, because these are printed by great big wooden blocks in ink. But he's used, the way he's laid out those letters really gets you a sense of somebody shouting taxi. Bottom left, that's called a monospace, which basically it's computerized. So every single letter is exactly the same width as every other letter. Middle left, very modernist designs, very sort of sleek, modern, goes back to the Bauhaus, if you've heard of Bauhaus from the 1920s, but this is a modern design. So that's very much kind of the opposite about some of the bottom two there. That's to do with removing all unnecessary decoration and detail. And top left there, another handwritten one, just like the jazz one. So just giving you a bit of a inspirational spread of all the things that, some of the things that typography can do. And also you'll have your own taste as well, of what kind of things you'd like, how you'd like to design things. And take a look around you. So these images here, the result of me taking some photos on a 20-second walk through a tube station just last week. So top left, again, you probably just take this for granted as wallpaper. The typography that is the London Underground. That typeface there, that was actually designed 100 years ago. And I think we're so used to seeing it now, but if you saw that without the London Underground logo next to it, you would recognize it as the London Underground typeface. That's very much part of the brand. That has been designed from scratch to be the London Underground brand. Just quickly canter through these quickly. So it's just sort of looking at what some of these designers have done. So let's clear the air. So obviously the idea there is they've used an outline font to help communicate the idea of clear. In the middle there, hold the handrail. Really quite cool sort of retro 20s, 30s vibe going on, using the typography to really add some drama to the message. Imagine if you didn't have that drama and you just wrote, don't hold the handrail, that'd be really quite a dull message. So they really sort of grabs your eye when you're walking past. Corsage, I assume that's a movie, is it, or a play? I can't quite see. So combining illustrative elements within the typeface. Another one there, bottom right, closing doors, again, really using the type in an expressive way to grab your attention and communicate the message. Lucky Saint is a brand from Brewdog beer. Again, anything generally with kind of advertising design, what the designer and art director, we'll talk about what an art director is later perhaps, are trying to achieve is if you took the logo away, you would recognize that poster as what brand it is. So you can almost, that it's got a very own aesthetic of itself. And then the bottom two are quite similar principle in terms of a design idea, using a photographic or illustrative device as part of the message to replace a letter from the the eye is replaced with a fork, a bit of bacon, and oh my gosh is the pods, obviously. Yeah, so this is all around us all the time, and we may not even notice it, or you may, everyone walks past it every day, doesn't give it a second notice. But you find the more you learn about design and the more you design, your kind of designer's radar just starts noticing these things. And I certainly found, as it even progressed even more than that, quite a weird thing happens, is that when you see anything like a poster, any kind of design, almost for a split second, you don't see it as a whole poster. It's like you've got weird kind of goggles on, and your brain instantly deconstructs what you're looking at. It looks at the font and the angle and the color, and yeah, it's quite a strange thing the more you start to design. That's the main section. So we're starting with the evolution of type and its technologies. Again, so without getting bogged down in a history lesson here, that's not the intention at all. This is showing how the history and the evolution of type helps us understand where we are now and helps us make decisions about how to design now. So what we know as our alphabet is actually called the Roman alphabet. So clearly, there's a Greek alphabet and Arabic alphabet. So ours is the Roman alphabet, and it's the result of 4,000 years of transformation. So the image you're seeing there is a small section from the Trajan column, big stone column in Rome from 113 AD. And all these letters were quite obviously carved 4,000 years ago. Interestingly, if you look top left, there's another excerpt from the Trajan column, a slightly larger image. In the 80s, Trajan, the typeface, was designed as obviously a complete direct homage to the Trajan column. And interestingly now, with your designer radar, if you then look at a load of Hollywood movie designs, for some reason this typeface is much beloved of Hollywood movie designers, and you'll start seeing it everywhere once you've seen it once. So the technology was clearly just a hammer and a chisel. And originally they would mark out the letters also just using thick and thin reed brushes. So the technology of what they had to work with, stones and chisels, quite clearly influenced or determined what the letter forms look like. It's like they go hand in hand. So I mentioned a serif typeface earlier. So probably most of us, or if not, it doesn't matter, have heard of a serif typeface or a sans serif typeface, which I'll talk about in a moment. So the serif, if you look bottom right, is the kind of the spiky bits on the end of a letter, if you like, to put it really simply. Well, that actually goes back to these Roman carvings. So as the Roman was carving the letters, he would hammer a horizontal incision top and bottom of each letter just to make the letters look neat and create nice, neat horizontal rows of letterings. So over time, those chisel marks have evolved into serifs. So while we're on categories of typeface, so a serif is a category of typeface, of which there are many, 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 many. Another category is sans serif. So sans is from French, which means without. So these really came about, the early 20th century, mainly, again, with the birth of modernism. And modernism was very much about less is more, stripping away unnecessary illustration, really, making everything really sleek. And also to maybe completely fry your brains, there's a few more categories than that. So if you look up from there, slab serif, which is another type of serif, but as you can see, it's blocky instead of pointy and spiky, if you like. Semi serif, as the name suggests, which is actually quite very popular thing for corporate logos in the 80s and 90s for some reason. They've got typewriter, display, brush, black letter, monospace, script. These are all categories. These aren't names of typefaces. So within each one of these categories, there will be dozens, if not hundreds, of typefaces that fit this category. So for example, display, that's really the name for any font that's really designed to use as a big headline. You wouldn't set it in a paragraph of 100 words because it's just too hard to read. So within that category, this is a big, blocky, slightly distressed look, but it can encompass many, many different styles. Okay. Right, so a quick live demo. So the reason I'm doing this is I was going to quickly retrace our steps. Yeah. So we started with stone serif, sans serif in the modernism. So when we are now on our computers, back up to current day again, our current technology, how do we look at categories of fonts? So I'm just going to come out of my full screen mode for a moment, and I'm going to show you what we do. So what I want to see on the screen here is a screen grab of Adobe Creative Cloud, Adobe CC, which you'll need for the course, by the way. You'll need to have Adobe. And when you click on your Adobe, you'll have a section called Manage Fonts. And I'll show you what happens. Bear with me. Okay. Right. So if you imagine, I've now clicked on, I hope you can see that okay, it's probably very small, apologies. This is your standard Adobe Windows, lots of detail here, you don't need to worry about all this stuff here immediately. On a daily basis, you don't really use it, to be honest. But down here is Manage Fonts. So if you click Manage Fonts, you end up here. Oh, Nini, can you still see my screen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool, thank you. Right. Right. So this isn't to say, right, this is how you go about choosing a font. This is not the object of this. This is just giving you, see if I can blow it up a little bit larger. Okay. It's showing you in current modern day managing typefaces. If you're in Adobe, you'll see these categories here, yeah, these classifications they call it. So it's serif, sans serif, slab serif, script, hand and mono. Okay. So we'll zoom back out again. And then within each, as partly the reason for this session today is showing you how not to get totally fried. Like, okay, well, if I click on serif, I then get, how many results do I get? Yeah, 494 different typefaces under serif. So quite clearly, what not to do is to just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and trying to find a typeface. Okay, that's not how you design, and that's not the process. Okay, but it can be quite good fun if you've got a rough idea later on in design process, and you know what kind of category of font you want to use. Let's choose another one, sans serif. We can click more than one category. You get the idea. It's just a quick overview, just to show you the reality of how we go about choosing typefaces. I hope that's large enough on your guys' screens at home. But it's quite a good feature here when we come to it later, when we're learning how to use it with part of our design. FYI, it's quite a handy thing. You can actually type in, this is a test. We might say, oh, I know, just a minute, let's try this. Say designing a new Nike logo. And then previews, to make it bigger. You can then say, oh, how does my new Nike logo design look in a different typeface? So you can test. Clearly, that's obviously I'm just exaggerating. That's clearly not what we would do, but I'm just showing that there's a cool functionality here where you could type in some sample text, and it shows you how it looks set in these different typefaces to give you an idea. Yeah. Okay. Right. The next where we can look at different typeface categories. It's a website called Dafont. Now, apparently, quite a few people know about this, but it's getting quite popular now. This is more kind of for when we talk about display fonts, so kind of like just fun, quirky, handmade fonts. A lot of them are made by amateur type designers, so the quality varies. You can see here some crazy stuff. But, you know, I don't see any gap. Can't imagine there's any design brief where you would need that, but who knows? But you can here again, same here. You can, if you want to have some fun, if you've got quite a unique project that requires something quite different, quirky, handwritten, a whole bunch of stuff. Let's try one here. Eroded actually has got some quite good ones in it. It's got some sort of quite trendy kind of distressed typography if you're designing something like that. You know, like kind of Walking Dead or something like that. Yeah, the Walking Dead designers would have used a surface something like this. Yeah. And or probably last one, when we looked at handwritten ones, brush. Again, you do have to scroll through to find the best ones. You get the idea, yeah? So they're all very unique, and some you have to be careful. Some of them are free for personal use and not licensed, but we'll come to that later. Okay, so that's just a really super quick summary snapshot of how we manage typefaces when we're designing, but it's not the design process. I'll show you that later. Right, let me just close these tabs so I don't look at that. Right. Okay. Okay, right. So where were we? Okay, so second milestone, pardon the pun. So we looked at Roman carvings, and their technology was hammer and chisel. So onto the Middle Ages and the 13th century, things were written on vellum, which is thinly stretched goat skin usually, and quite crude paper. So I'm sure you're all aware of these. They're called illustrated or illuminated manuscripts. So these were done by monks in monasteries, all by hand, using ink and gold leaf and a few colours. Yeah, and that was very much that was the technology. So that governed how these were created, and these were very much only for nobility, the church, and really the super rich. So your average person wouldn't really get any access to this. So the next big leap forward is called the Gutenberg press, invented by a guy called Johann Gutenberg in the 15th century. And the reason this is important is because it revolutionized the distribution of knowledge, because it used movable type blocks, which means you produce many copies of a single work in a relatively short amount of time. So, for example, I know what would be a middle-class person in the 15th century, they could have their own Bible at home, or other kind of piece of information could be distributed across Europe. So that was a really big deal. But if you look down the bottom there, I don't know if you can see it's big enough, it still used it's called black letter, Gothic letter form style of the monks just down there. So aesthetically, it still hadn't moved forward. Okay, so next big leap forward, 18th century, John Baskerville. So really the technology leap forward here was innovations in printing, using much smoother, whiter paper and finer quality ink. John Baskerville was an engraver, printer and designer, and he's designed engrave gravestones, funny enough. Now, the reason this is a big deal is that it allowed for a new style of typography with contrasting stroke weights. So if you look at the letters here, some really fine strokes and wider strokes, clearly. But they also opened up the letter spacing and the kerning, which I'll mention that word again in a moment, and wide margins. So look how elegant and wide and open and spacious it is compared to Monk's black lettering. Yeah, so this is a pretty main revolution. Now, the reason this is important to us nowadays is legibility and aesthetics. So as a designer, you will constantly balancing these two main issues. So legibility. Yeah, so somebody comes to you and they want something designed. You say, okay, what are the words? What's the name of your brand, or whatever it is you're designing? Those words need to be communicated. But then they have to be communicated in a certain way. So that's your stylistic and aesthetic decisions applied to that message. So that's the aesthetics. But you have to make sure, well, make sure your aesthetics don't impede legibility too much, or maybe your aesthetics even help legibility. Again, we'll see in a moment. Say if it's a really important hazard warning sign, or do not press this button type message, you would design it in such a way that it was about as legible you could probably see it from 10 miles away. That kind of things. This balance of legibility and aesthetics. So it's another important reason why we're looking at John Baskerville here. And if you open up pretty much any like a Word document, anything like that nowadays, pretty much the typeface Baskerville is a standard typeface in your choice, and that's where Baskerville comes from. Okay, and next one, we're almost up to date now. So this is called hot metal, which you may be aware of because it's kind of enjoyed a resurgence from a sort of a craft artisan printing technique currently. So pretty much for the whole of the 20th century, almost up to the late 70s, everything, absolutely every single newspaper was printed using this method. So it's called hot metal because each of these letters were cast from molten lead. And it was the compositor, some guy here is highly skilled and highly guarded member of the company, had to hand set every single letter. And look, you had to set it backwards and also calculate, say you're setting a paragraph for a newspaper or a book, depending how big the lettering is, how many letters can I get on a whatever 3-inch wide column, how many words can I set, and you have to all calculate it by measuring them. So nowadays, think about, you sit at your computer, you type away, you type a paragraph, it all just fits in, flows away, and you probably don't give it a second thought. But up to the 1970s, you'd have to hand measure the letters and figure it all out mathematically how it all fits together. And then these, of course, will be then inked and printed on printing presses. Yeah. Really, sorry. So when I say it went up to the late 70s, so that's the 80s. Then, of course, is when Apple Macintoshes came in, and then everything that we know today evolved from there. So we're kind of up to date until our present Apple Macintosh and Adobe technological milestone, as it were. Okay, so that brings us nicely to essential terminologies and techniques. Before I go through that, does anyone have any questions at all while I have a glass of water?
Chris, there was one question in our chat about this. That font isn't royalty free.
No, it's not. You have to, as I was saying, you have to be very careful. Some of them will say free for personal use. Some of them are completely free. So you do have to be careful if you are using it in a commercial, i.e. paid context. But some of them, depending on the designer, if you click through the, a couple of clicks into it, some of the designers have, you can pay them £10 or $5 or whatever it is as a kind of a goodwill gesture, and they'll allow you to use the typeface. So it does vary across the typefaces. And as I said, yeah, you just have to check slightly carefully before you use it.
Thank you. This was the question in our chat. So if anything else, you can share in the chat or ask questions, or then Chris can proceed with his interesting presentation.
Okay, cool, thanks. Right. Anyone? Shall I continue? Okay, so this brings us nicely to essential terminologies.
Sorry, and one more question.
Yes, good. I like questions. Far away.
Yeah, is that the same case for Adobe font?
No, Adobe is if you have an Adobe. So basically, to use, say, Adobe Photoshop or Adobe InDesign, you'll need a Adobe monthly subscription, which varies depending on whether you're a student or what kind of what your situation is. Once you have your Adobe subscription, all the fonts are free to use. They do also have Adobe stock library, which is a load of, call it royalty-free photography and illustration. But nowadays you have to be careful with the word royalty-free. What it actually means is they're cheaper. They're like 10, 20, 50 quid rather than say 500 or 1,000 quid compared to other more expensive sites. So it's just a little thing to watch out for there. But the typefaces are free to use once you've got your Adobe subscription. Answer your question anymore?
Yes. So where can we see your works, your portfolios?
Excellent. Yeah, I might point you in the direction right at the end. But funnily, and you should ask that, there are a couple of projects in this presentation that I have designed, and they are relevant to the presentation as well. So that's quite a good question you've asked that. Okay, anything else? No? Shall I continue?
Yeah.
Shall I go? Okay, cool. Right, so quick recap then. So go back to here. So the reason I'm saying this is a nice place to go to the section 3 is that many of the typographic terms and techniques we use today on our Macs or PCs are a legacy from hot metal. So for example, you look down the size there, you probably heard of point size. You know what point size is your font, how big it is. Leading has the space between the lines. Uppercase and lowercase, is it capital letters or not? And kerning, and I'll explain kerning in a moment. So point size actually goes back to hot metal. So in the days where these guys had to measure each of these little lead blocks, measure them per inch. 1 inch was 72 points inch, and there's another measurement called picas, I don't think we see nowadays in the, well, you won't be aware of it in the general daily software. 1 pica was 12 points. It's quite a mathematical thing to figure all this stuff out, but that's where the term point size comes from. Leading, so leading, literally the space between each line. Quite interesting. So if you look at this image here on the top right, when the compositor, as they were called, or the composer sometimes, wanted to increase the space between each line as he was setting it, he would literally add very thin strips of lead. So the more lead strips he added, the greater the leading. That's how how we got the name leading. And uppercase and lowercase. So if you see on the left here, they used to have these sort of wooden trays, rough, just under 1 meter long, and it'd all be set in drawers. So each, imagine a great big chest of drawers, all alphabetically labelled, obviously, or getting the right mess otherwise. And it was also segregated into capital letters and non-capital letters. So all the capital letters were in the uppercase of the cabinet, and all the non-capital letters were in the lowercase of the cabinet. And that's how they become known as uppercase and lowercase. Interesting fact. Okay, and kerning. Okay, so what is kerning? So kerning is to do with, we're now looking at this amusing poster here. That's related to the space between each letter. So we can talk about letter spacing, which is the overall across the whole width. You know, what is the that's measured in points as well. How widely apart do you want to set your letters? That's your decision as a designer, because it has different aesthetic results and different legibility results, and it varies typeface to typeface. But all of this we'll learn as we're designing a real project. Kerning is manipulating the individual space between each letter. You can see here, if you do an extreme example, not only is it really hard to read, but it's really, really not nice to look at all. Right, so what we're going to do now, this is actually an interactive bit of fun we can have at home. So if you, that was the best way to do that. If you guys, everyone who's watching, can see that URL, can you photograph it or type it in and open that up in your browser, please. Let me know if it doesn't work or you can't do it. I'll give you a minute or two to do that, and then I'll join in as well. It's going okay. I shall continue. Let me just come out of here. Okay, so you don't have to, but it's might just be a bit of fun, and you can actually get, this is a real hands-on live demo of how to space letter. Okay, so anybody shout if they're trying to access it and can't? Message in the comments or wherever. Okay, so it's type.method.ac. Okay, so what is this? Okay, there's a whole different series of words here, and once you've completed one, you go on to the next one, and they generally get harder and harder because they get harder based on what the word is and what the typeface is. So what we're trying to achieve, again, you wouldn't be doing this for a whole paragraph of type, or set quite clearly. This is the kind of thing you would do if you had a big headline or definitely a logo. Okay, so what we're trying to do is just optically, visually, perhaps not so mathematically, trying to set it so that the space, the negative space between the letters to your eye looks kind of the same. So the reason it's optical is because, of course, all the letters are all different shapes, aren't they? So if you were to just measure, say, the gap between the W and the A, it wouldn't be the same as the gap between the V and the E, if you can see that, yeah? Because, of course, we have this great big hole here. So you have to just compensate by eye to where you think it's roughly where you think. Now, that's not, I'm just going to do a quick, I'm not going to agonize over it. Once you think you've got it as good as you can get it, you click done, and the topographer, the professional topographer who was set this task, then scores it. So click done. Oh dear, I only got 78. Right, so let's go to the next one. Right, so this you can see now, each typeface has different characteristics, of course, but they also behave differently depending on what the word is. So if you look at this great big capital T compared to the Y, there's a massive hole here. Now you are actually allowed, if you want to tuck it under the T. Yeah, so anyway, so I have a little bit of a, I don't think that one moves. Yeah, okay, so the end ones don't move. Oops. Again, I won't spend too long. I'm just giving you a demo. Don't know if anyone else, I hope somebody is joining along at home. It doesn't matter if not. Okay, click done. Okay, I got 100 for that one.
Yeah, we had there from Richa 100%. So good job.
Okay, well, let's try some harder ones. So now we're setting serif capital letters. You're probably all doing your own here, but anyone who's looking at my screen, there's another thing to learn here. Can you see that the V, when it joins the E, some typefaces have this designed into them where it seamlessly joins? That's called a ligature. We don't more of that later, don't worry. Anyway, okay, so let's try see optically, we've got a big hole here. Each typeface behaves differently. And also when you're designing something, each typeface, although they might say this might be, the size might be 30 points, the other typeface could be 30 points, but it can actually be taller or wider or more squashed. Each typeface has a slightly different actual size compared to what. So if you said, right, you set all your typefaces in a design at, say, at random number, choose 30 points in size, they wouldn't all be the same height if you measure them in millimeters. They all behave differently. Okay, I wasn't concentrating on that one. Okay, there you go, like there. Okay, here's another one. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you get the idea, yeah? So remember what we went back to with 18th century. Remember the 18th century, we were talking about legibility and aesthetics. You know, what is legible, what looks pleasant, and what looks just plain wrong. Yeah, that's your job as a designer to make those decisions. Or you might say, perfectly legible, but I think having it really spaced wide apart actually looks better for this particular project. Or I think spacing them really close together is the kind of the look that I want. Okay, you decide that. Okay. Sorry, Nini, I can't see the rest of the screen. So
Yeah,
give me
we
a
have
shout when
very
you think
talented attendees. They got twice 100%.
hey,
And we have one who is asking that she's desperately needed your course to attend because she got like 59%. So
excellent.
yeah.
Cool. Okay, I don't know how many of you are. Yeah, they tend to generally get a bit more tricky as you go along. I'm not going to concentrate. I'm just going to see what other words there are. 100. Okay. There you go. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to come out of that now. Okay, back to the presentation. Okay, is everybody back on? I'm going to crack on now. All right. Hope you had fun with that. Okay, so we looked at here. These are kind of some point size leading uppercase. These are some really obviously key everyday terms that you all come across in daily life. Even if you're not a designer, you would have obviously heard of uppercase, you know, and point size. It's no great surprise. There's loads and loads of others, but actually, you know, part of this course as well is getting you to stage when you can actually start designing stuff. So I've circled here in pink what kind of common ones that you would need to know or come across on a more regular basis. You know, there's a whole load of others here that you won't really come across in a day-to-day job unless you were designing a typeface from scratch, or you know, spending 2 months on a really high profile rebranding project where you're really paying minute attention to the letter forms of the logo or something like that. Tend not to need to know some of these other typographic terms like spine, bracket, finial, nink, shoulder, but you will come across them. You know, it's just an FYI. But again, it's part of kind of how the course is set up. It's really comprehensive, but also really teaching the key things that you need to get you going and not getting bogged down in stuff that really I can very vouch for that you don't really need to know on a daily basis, to be really honest. Yeah, unless you want to. Right. Okay, so another demo. So part of what we'll be learning on the course is obviously here we're not actually able to design anything today quite clearly because I'm doing an on-screen presentation, but you will be learning everything hands-on. You'll be learning by doing, and part of that is using Adobe software, which is the industry standard of what you're going to be designing in. Okay, so the main three, there's be InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop. And AE there stands for After Effects, but that's kind of video and motion graphics and animating things. But you can also now animate in Photoshop if you've got the latest version. Anyway, get to the point. I'll probably start with, I'm going to show you, if you've never used InDesign before, how I would say quite intuitive and simple it is to get up to speed, to actually start getting to a level you can actually design something. Okay, so I think knowing, say, 10% of its full functionality is enough to get you designing. Okay, unless you are much further down the road, again, getting really into the minutiae of things, you really don't need to know a lot of the things that are there, and I'll show you this in a moment. And again, with Illustrator and Photoshop, yes, you can design in those, and people do. Yes, you can do typography in that, and you can do imagery in that and vice versa. But I think really if designing something from scratch, you wouldn't need these until later on in the process to do specific tasks. And InDesign is, I would say, much simpler, more intuitive way just to move images around and very quickly try lots of different ideas without getting too bogged down in the technicality side of things. However, if on the course, as I said, the projects are flexible for those of you who are really interested in motion design and already, got to grips with perhaps the more sort of foundation level of knowledge, and you're already leaping ahead. Yes, we can also learn some After Effects techniques, and you can actually animate stuff in After Effects as well, if that interests you. Okay, so I'm just going to come out of this again, and I'm going to open InDesign to show you what happens. Okay, so it's probably, I'm not sure how well this has come across on a Google Meet screen, but it probably looks like a load of little twiddly details in here, but not sure. That's why I'm showing you this, to show you actually what you don't need to know, to be honest. That's one way of putting it. Okay, so this is a blank page in Adobe InDesign. This is an A4 page that I've created. Okay. However, if you wanted to, let's go back a step. I'm in InDesign. I want a new page. Oops. New document. So I'm going right back to the beginning here. Okay. So you can see here they've got a load of presets. So if you want to design print, you click print. A4 letter. There's a whole different load of presets. Don't need to worry today. Or you can, depending on what you're working on, all the different paper sizes, etc., etc. And then here you can also determine, set your own page size. Yeah, okay, pretty obvious. But you also have a load of digital formats as well. If you're designing for web, I'll say probably here, actually, if you're designing for web, that's a slightly different thing. I probably won't talk about today. And just to show you really how to get started. So I've clicked A4, I want it horizontal, and I create page, and that's how I got to a blank sheet of paper. Remember what I started saying at the start of the presentation? Oh my God, I've got a blank sheet of paper. Where do I start? And also all the things that we looked at. We talked about leading, typefaces, of course, letter spacing. This is now you, the designer, sat down with think of this as literally an A4 sheet of paper. So pre-computers, say, you might have, okay, bear with me. Okay, you don't need to worry about what I'm doing at the moment, don't worry. I'm just setting something up as a demo. Okay, right, so pre-computers, think about, you would literally have everything on a pasteboard, literally pieces of paper, pieces of type, files cut out of the film, cut out of literally paper, and you'd be moving stuff around on a pasteboard and gluing stuff down, literally gluing stuff, and that would then get photographed, graphed, and then printed. So the one way to think about, I think, if you're doing it in the initial design stages, just think of it like that. You can move, if that was an image, a photograph, you can move stuff around. Okay. All right. So the reason of this actually isn't, I'm not trying to teach you everything there is to know about InDesign today, clearly. The point of this is, here's a page I made earlier. Right. It's really the two. So you have all these two different main palettes. These are photographs. I made them large just so you can hopefully see them on screen a bit better. These are images. There's a whole load of other things here. We don't need to do that today. You don't need to worry. Really, this is your toolbox here. It's called Toolbox. And this is your character panel. This is where you control your typography. So really, I'd say just in the initial stages of design, and this is what I would do and any designer would do, you're only really using your cursor just to grab stuff. And this here, the T, that's to create T for text box. Sounds obvious. And this is a little color box you'll click depending on what color you want. And really to get, okay, I'm being super simple here, but just to get you started, you're going to be working with pictures and words. Yeah. So you only need to do that with your cursor, text tool, I mean, the cursor, you can just move stuff around. Okay, there's nothing else to worry about. Literally, just keep thinking of it as a blank sheet of paper. But then when you do come to, so that remembering that on board, actually, if I just move that out of the way and demonstrate some of the things that we've looked at just now. So let's type in so I'll create a text box by get my T tool. Sorry. Okay, T, grab my T, create any shape you like and type, and then you just type away. So obviously there are other programs you might be familiar with already, have a similar principle of how to type. Yeah, this is a test. Okay, right. Highlight my text. Again, the good thing about Adobe is so much of it is really intuitive. You can highlight it or just double click it, done. And then in your character box, apologies, I just clicked the wrong one, human error. Okay, in your character box, that's a large picture of it here. Get a drop down window. And there you go, there's a couple of hundred typefaces I've got installed on my computer. Yeah, I was just going to choose one at random. Actually, just tell you what, let's go with basketball. So learn about basketball. Okay, I'll make it bigger. See the points. Obviously, I'm sure if you're all familiar with this. It's currently heighted at, I don't know if you can see on the screen. Hope you can see. Okay, 12 point. I'm going to go 72 point just so you can see it. Okay, so now I'm using 72 point basketball. Left side. Now, if you notice, if I zoom in, it's just something to talk about as well. So so we've been looking at kerning. Yeah, we just looked at that kerning exercise. So when you type in anything in any Adobe, any software at all, the computer is making a decision. You don't know it, but it's making a decision for you automatically. It's deciding how wide apart those letters are. Okay, and it's not always a great decision. So you do have to check what the computer's doing. Don't just take it, I've typed it in, job done. Okay. So anyway, so let's duplicate that. I'm not going to get too much into the detail here. I'm just giving you a really quick summary overview. So it says basketball, and now let's look at character spacing. Kerning, kerning is individual, but I can open up the character spacing. That's loading, apologies. And here is just have a leading control here, again measured in points, and making that as tight or spaced out as you like. And here's your letter spacing, again, you can space that out as widely as you like. Okay. And finally, so here's it. So this is kind of where you get into, depending on your project, how you make kind of elegant decisions, or do you want it to look like punk and mad and all messed up that you might want to sort of have at an angle and destroy it, or do you want it to look elegant like a really expensive brand? So for example, if I want to go for an elegant vibe, I might set it like this. I should make it small. I might just make it really wide out. Again, okay, so look, same typeface, just different treatments. As you, the designer, is quite simple, just to show the principle of what we're doing. But this is how. So we looked at kerning, we've looked at basketball, we looked at spacing, and this is all now how we see things when we're designing on our 21st century Macs. Yeah. Okay. Any questions on that, please? Yes, no? Or learning any of the software at all, actually, if you've got any software learning questions? No? Okay. Oh, is that a question?
Yeah. What software does one use if they want to create a font?
Well, that's a good question. There is a program called Fontographer and maybe one or two others, which is kind of usually used by I'd say a professional type designer. What does that mean? But if you're really kind of getting really into nitty gritty. However, you can use Adobe Illustrator in exactly the same way, and it's so advanced. It's got so many features nowadays that what you can do. I won't open it now because I'll have to open a whole load of other windows, but I might be able to sort of emulate what you would see in Illustrator. So this is the principle of what you would do. So you would start with I'm just choosing this at random, obviously. You don't need to watch what I'm doing, don't worry. I'm just showing you the principle. Okay, right. So the principle, designing of type or, it's very common, and if you're using a big brand logo, pretty much nowadays all of them will be they will be bespoke and hand adjusted in some way. They won't just be straight out of the box. We use this typeface for our brand. So what they do is, each type letter, don't know if you can see that, you would reduce it to its geographical shapes, and there's tiny little dots here. If I click on one, I can start messing around with the typeface. I can change the curves, I can change the points. Yeah, you get the idea. I'm just obviously destroying it. That's not what you would do, but that's the principle of doing it. And the Illustrator, you would do that in Illustrator, not in InDesign, because it's got much more complex, not more complex, but more subtle controls over doing that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think I was more concerned about how to make it into a font rather than creating a font, but I'm going to look into Fontographer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Again, there's a difference thing about if you want to make a brush font, like your own handwriting, into a typeface. That's a slightly different process again, but yeah, it's quite not unusual. I think, yeah, if you were when you're working as a graphic designer, yeah, creating a typeface from scratch is probably quite a unique project to do. Yeah. Okay. Right. Back to presentation. Again, so just to recap, just to repeat, that was just a really super quick demo with InDesign, if anyone's not seen InDesign, and just to show, if you've never used design software at all, how actually quite intuitively simple it is just to get started. Yeah, we're not going to get bogged down spending weeks learning loads of technical computer skills, because you really don't need to. Okay, and the same goes for an Illustrator and Photoshop. You will learn by the end of the 10 workshops, you'll learn enough to have a working knowledge to be a daily designer. You'll have enough knowledge to actually use these programs. Yeah. Okay, right. Okay, next section, expressive typography. So no more live demos. This is basically just looking at a load of cool stuff. Inspirational use of typography and using it creatively. And just a few examples here. There are many different ways you could use it. So a couple of examples of using it illustratively to actually illustrate the message or the word being portrayed. Brand personality. So, think of any brand. Think of Nike versus Harrods versus Coca-Cola, but of course they have their own imagery and colors associated with it, but absolutely. And look at the London Underground that we saw right at the beginning of the presentation. All the typefaces are used to convey the right kind of brand personality or brand mission. Tone of voice. What we mean by tone of voice in a design and branding and advertising context is clearly not audio. It's the tone of, it's kind of like how big and bold and shouty does the message look? As I said, don't push this button, danger, biohazard, or those kind of messages. You'll be big, shouty tone of voice, as you would call it. Yeah. Or Likewise, if you think of like a super posh, elegant brand, really, it'd be much more understated and quiet and expensive. You know, so the quietness and understatedness is its tone of voice. That's what we mean in this context. And premium versus value, quite similar. You know, posh brands versus cheap brands. Or anyway, let's crack on. Okay, so looking at type. So this is some just cool examples really to show type using to illustrate the message. So the middle three there were done by a very famous designer called Herb Lubalin. So quickly running through here. So marriage, obviously, he's joined the R and the R together. Mother and child, it's very famous. So using the ampersand to kind of create the in utero effect. And families, sort of cleverly adding a dot to the L and changing the heights of the eyes. So in a way, an idea like that, it almost looks obvious and simple, doesn't it? But actually the skill here is he's managed to simplify it right down to the bare bones of communicating the idea without any other illustrative elements. If you can, it's just the typography being the illustration, but also doing it in a surprising and sort of quite delighting way, isn't it? When you see it as the viewer or the customer or whatever, if it's a brand, you think, oh, that's a nice idea, don't you? You get a kind of a little gut reaction to, oh, that's clever. Yeah. So that's the skill of the designer there. But also the choice of the typeface here. Clearly, this kind of nice, bold, round, sans serif typeface really suits the idea here. It wouldn't really work using this typeface. Yeah. So a bit more kind of out there thing here with beards, same principle, but yeah, using the whole swirliness to create the curliness of a beard, clearly. Top left, sound music. It's a different principle from the middle here. It's more just the aesthetic of that design, isn't it? It's just the kind of the floral nature of the typeface communicating the vibe there. And bottom left there is the word 8, but they're not made of letters. I don't know if you can spot. Each letter form, E-I-G-H-T, is made by cropping little parts out of the numeral 8 to kind of fool your eye that it says 8. So it's quite clever. Just a few more, one more page. Some designer having some fun here. The moon, a little orbit of the second O. Elevator, they've taken the crossbar off the A to create up and down. Parallel, just extended the L's. You get the idea. But again, it's done in it's kind of stripped everything down, not having any other illustrative elements, just letting the type do it. And again, in a really sort of surprising and delighting kind of a way. Confused, stolen, nicked a bit off the L. And actually one of my favorites is this is just so simple. Just isn't it amazing how your eye still reads this as delete? All they've done is remove the L, but you know it says delete. I don't know how that works, but I thought it was quite cool. Okay, so those were designers having some fun, but here's some actually real examples. The two on the left here by a guy called Paul Belford. There's a poster for the Type Museum. This is an autumn show and a summer show. So if you imagine the message was, come to an autumn exhibition, no, come to an exhibition at the Type Museum this autumn. You think, oh, what's that? And you just go along looking at a bunch of letters. But just by using the letters in a really expressive way and creating the feeling of autumn leaves, it just looks a really exciting, fantastic poster, doesn't it? The same here, using these threes as butterflies. Yeah, it looks like a really interesting and intriguing poster. Yeah, so that's a really good example as the designer adding their input and there's again, remember aesthetics and legibility, but also doing it in a really elegant, surprising, and entertaining way. Okay, by contrast, on the right is I love you, I hate you. Again, it's amazing how I would read that as I love you, I hate you. The designer has, using the scrunched up paper effect, has really sort of made decisions about what is the minimum amount of letter or the most letters he can destroy and take away while your brain still reads it. And then we're using the scrunched up paper, it creates remember the tone of voice as well, coming into that a little bit as well. Yeah. Okay, so on to tone of voice. Again, just a few slides here just to show you some cool stuff. On left here is a anti-slavery ad by Saatchi & Saatchi, big ad agency where I used to work for many years. So quite clearly here, remember I talked about tone of voice. Yeah, it's kind of a shouting, isn't it? So this is really designed to offend you in a way, isn't it? It's meant to cause offense to look at it. Hence, that's why they've designed it like that. It certainly didn't happen by accident. There's a taxi thing that I showed you earlier. So taxi, really sort of almost hear that coming off the page. And on the right, if you look at top right where it says caution, so that, you know, we're all used to seeing these kind of messages. So totally stripped down, that'll be Helvetica bold or something like, yes, that's Helvetica, and yellow and black. Which we'll also look at a little bit of color theory on the course as well, which I haven't got time to go into here. And here is a project for Pernod the drink. If you ever had it, it's really quite strong aniseed drink. It really causes a reaction when you smell it, when you taste it, even when you order it. The barman says, "Oh God, you want Pernod?" And this is a campaign called Social Media. This is a kind of an ad campaign. Not social media, social chemistry. So the social chemistry headline has been designed like the chemical symbols, many years before Breaking Bad, I should say. And they did a load of sampling activity in bars and stuff like that, where they kind of taped up the bars with this hazard tape, and all the posters were kind of emulating this caution type vibe, hazard vibe. And again, yeah, social chemistry idea, that was one of mine. Okay. Expensive versus value. This is just obviously just 4 examples here, 4 themes. There are many, of course, but it's quite an easy one to demonstrate, this one. So on the right here, kind of value or budget brands. You notice a common theme here, lots of red, big, bold sans serif. I think there's not a single serif font in there. It's all done deliberately, of course. They want you to understand that they're about budget and, you know, discounted pricing. And by contrast, on the left, the very, very fine serif typeface of Tiffany, which is based on Bodoni, very similar to Baskerville, Harvey Nichols. And bottom left is a bit of a label from Johnny Walker Blue Label, which is about 200 quid a bottle. So look, you don't have to use serif typography to make something look posh and expensive, but you've looked, you know, the crafting of these beautifully spaced out letters and the elegance of the fine typography, you just know, looking at that, that's expensive, risky. Yeah. So the designer has done that. You know, there isn't another label on it saying this is really expensive. The designer is communicating that idea with how they've designed the typography. Again, Hague, okay, not as expensive, Blue Label, but again, it's sans serif. It doesn't all have to be serif, but just really elegant use of sans serif typography there. And I think, yeah, this last one for, I think, I don't. Anyway, so brand personality. Try not to spend too long on this. So of course, Nike in the middle. Of course, you almost don't need to see the Nike tick to know that's a Nike ad. Yeah, remember I went talking about earlier about the Brewdog ad. The art direction and design is really kind of geared up to really understanding that this is what our brand's about. Without just, it's not all about a logo. Brands aren't about logos. Newsflash. C4 energy drink. Obvious what's going on there, right in your face, full of energy, a bit like the hazard warning vibe. Tesco everyday value. I didn't put that in the previous slide. Then it's kind of a value budget brand, but there's a very delicate balance here with the designer that it's food. So if they made it look really cheap, you wouldn't really want to eat it, I don't think. So they've kind of used simple illustrative images here and kind of strip things down so you know it's no frills, but without making you think it's cheap and nasty. So that was a delicate job to do there. Innocent smoothies, we're all familiar with that. It's using it really quite, I don't know if you can see on the screen, it's kind of rounded, kind of preschool, you know, very child under 5 kind of typeface here to very much go with the innocent brand. Yeah, you know that's an innocent ad, even if you took the bottles away. iPhone's another good example. Yes, it's all down to the photography, but look at all the space they use around. The use of negative space is very much the brand with the typeface. And finally on the left is Ben & Jerry's ice cream ads, award-winning ads from a few years ago. It's kind of, so what they're communicating here was, you know, the brief would have been, you know, it's not processed, it's not in great big factories, even though it probably is. You know, there's people with hand dishing out the ingredients and that sense of, gorgeousness of the ingredients. So all the typefaces are slightly wobbly, slightly hand made. Yeah, just kind of went with the message and went with the brand personality or the brand qualities they wanted to communicate, without saying, literally writing, hey, this is what we are as a brand. You get that from how the designer has communicated the aesthetics. Okay, I might have to speed up a bit, actually. And finally on this one, again, this is a live project. This is a project I was involved in. This is a brand called Nanny Care. It's baby milk, basically formula powder in a tin. It's actually a very quite premium product, much more expensive than other mainstream milks. It's actually derived from whole goat milk, whereas most other formulas are made in a laboratory from cow's milk, but eventually go through about 100 processes in labs. But basically, it looked, really quite undesigned, unloved. Certainly doesn't look premium, and certainly didn't appeal to the premium audience. And the brief was it had to be an evolution, partly because of legal reasons as well. We had to keep the serif typeface, a serif typeface. It had to have an illustration. It had to have 1, 2, 3. You had to have the core elements the same, but we had to try and communicate it being more natural, more kind of wholesome, and more premium. But because of really, really strict marketing guidelines on baby milk, you're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to say anything at all that implies your product is better than another product. So we had to imply it was more premium and more natural just by the way it was designed. So basically, we stripped out as many elements as we could, changed the colors, made everything much whiter, introduced these, it's about whole milk, this kind of rippled milk effect to help people know it's from whole milk, it's not made in a lab. Reduced the illustrations down to more elegant black and white, pen and ink, and a combination of type here. Might not be able to see it on the presentation screen, I don't know. The fine spaced out typography, etc., 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 and also the art direction of the imagery as well. So rather than just having your bog standard baby in a studio shot, all kind of any lifestyle imagery was shot outdoors. Again, conveying, hey, we're more natural, even though you're certainly not allowed to say that. So that's kind of how we did it from art direction and design point of view, when you're not actually allowed to say explicitly what you want to say. Any other questions, by the way? I haven't stopped for questions, so I'm sort of trying to rattle through now. Please do shout. Yes?
Hey, just a quick question about the use of serifs versus sans serif.
Yep.
You mentioned that serif implies this idea of expensive or high quality. Is that global, or is that just in kind of America, Europe, and the UK?
Yes, it's sweeping. I'll take you up on your first point, actually. It's not, maybe just in those brand examples I showed, Tiffany and stuff, they're using serif. It's quite, yeah, I would say it is probably a globally accepted way to treat the typeface, but I think it's where you treat it. You can't just say, I'm going to use the serif typeface and therefore it's more expensive and posh. That's not the case. It's how you treat it with all the other elements, how it's designed, how it's treated. And look at Tiffany, the color choice as well is key to that. So it's really part of the whole design idea. It's not, I remember something I said earlier, it's not just a case of, oh, we need a posh brand, or we need a youth brand, or we need a rebellious brand. Right, what typeface? Okay, job done. Quite clearly, that's not how it works. It's part of the whole solution.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so final section. So where do you start? It's just a few slides now, nearly at the end. So now we start to acquire all this knowledge. We learn more and more about typography. We learn more about how to use imagery and how to think creatively and all the different things and all the different considerations we can apply. Okay, somebody says, right, I need you to design me X, whatever that might be. Remember that list at the start. Is it a logo, a package, a poster? What is it? You've got a blank sheet of paper in front of you. Where do you start? As you probably gathered, hint, you don't start by choosing a typeface. You start even more simply, okay? So what is it you want to say? So literally, what are the words? What is the message? What is it you want to say? You can't just say, design me something, and you've got, what are you physically going to put in your design? Who are you saying it to? Are we talking to 5-year-olds in Scotland? Are we talking to retirees over 65 in the home counties? Whoever the audience is will, of course, have their own views on the world, have different tastes, have different buying behaviors. And there's a whole other subject in itself. So once you know as much as you can about that, how you should say it, that's where you come in. So once you know what you want to say, once you know who you're saying to, once you know what the brand is and all the kind of rational things that sit behind it, how do you then go about designing something? So brackets the brief there. Come to that moment. Ideally, if you're working for a client or in an agency, you will have hopefully a typed brief of these things written down. But anyway, that's the starting point. Make sure you know these key things first. And step 1 is ideas. Yeah. Start with research competitors, of course. Sounds obvious. Get insights into your audience. How do they think? Where do they shop? What do they do? What do they think about other brands? Start exploring concepts with sketches and scribbles, mind maps, little asterisk there. So these techniques will be taught on the course. So remember, if you feel you've maybe not done much art before, maybe you have, or maybe think, oh, what is a creative person? Am I a creative person? Where do ideas come from? So contrary to popular belief, ideas don't just come out of thin air. Some genius just comes up with an idea. Oh, he's a genius. It doesn't work like that. There are techniques, there are methods, and there are processes that we do, and that we will learn on the course of how to generate original ideas. Okay, and then you create as many rough ideas and scamps as possible, and don't self-edit yet. And also, so don't just stage 1, just ideas. Okay, and don't get stuck twiddling at stage 1. I'd say, as a summary, it's kind of common sense. The way you start with rough ideas first, and then of course review and narrow down your ideas. So maybe you came up with 6, 8, 10 rough scribbles or whatever. Have a look at them, see which ones answer the brief. So remember, what is it you're saying, what the brand is, who are you talking to, all these other considerations, and start creating some work in progress visuals in Adobe and eyes of eyes InDesign, because it's the fastest, I would say. And then that's the process, and then the real world, as it were. So there you are out in the world. Maybe you're working for yourself. I'm thedesigner.com, and you're presenting to a client, or you're in-house, you're presenting to the rest of your team, or if you're in an agency, you'd be presenting to the design director or the creative director. So you usually share and discuss the shortlist once you've created a few visuals, usually 2 or 3. Usually not too much more than that, because it just becomes too confusing, especially with a client as well. Okay, we're talking about some real world tips here. You show them too many, they're kind of often, apologies clients, like to choose a little bit of everything, and it becomes too hard for them to feed back. And also they're looking for you for guidance as well. You're presenting your recommended 2 or 3 ideas, okay, that you're not going to show them 10 different things because you don't know which way to go. And take on board relevant and hopefully constructive feedback. Okay, again, pretty much common sense in summary, but there's more to it than this, that which we'll learn on the course. And you start developing and refining a final chosen route. So sometimes, yeah, you do say that it is a reality. Oh, I really like the idea of idea A, but I really like the colours of idea C. That's a classic example of what might happen. So you take on board these feedbacks and you start developing a final idea. Again, another asterisk. Again, another bit of a professional world tip. Again, I can do a bit more of this as we go along through the course as well. So when you sort of left the course and you're outside in the outside world designing stuff, there's some good kind of daily tips of managing clients or managing teams. So anyway, depending on who your client is, share progress again if necessary. And the reason it says agree in advance is what you want to avoid right at the start, and flag it up right from the start, is agree how many rounds of amends. So how many for the budget? There'll be, think you've got a defined deadline, time scale to do your project. You will definitely have a defined budget, and amongst that deadline, time, and that budget gives you how much time you have to design initial visuals, develop the visuals, and create final detailed designs. Yeah. So in that time, if the client then says, oh, wants to change their mind 8, 10, 15 times, you have to be aware that in the budget you've allowed for 2 or 3 changes. If they want to keep changing their minds more than that, you have to agree an hourly rate that you say, well, okay, I'll do it, but it's going to cost you another hour's time or another 2 hours time, whatever. And usually you'd be amazed that once the client knows this, they want to change their time mind for the 6th time, and it's going to cost them money. It's amazing how quickly they make up their minds. Here's a little real world tip. Okay. And then final detail development and final presentation. Okay, so this is very much something that we'll be ending up with at the end of the 10 weeks. So when you've done your 2 projects, which could be any, a print and a digital project, we'll learn about not only how to create a print and a digital project, but also some of the key technical information and production methods you'll need. So somebody says, design me a homepage for a website, how you supply the files for that, and what kind of pixel dimensions you need, that kind of stuff. That's just one example. But when you present it creatively, say a logo is an example, you design a new logo. Generally try and avoid just giving them a white screen or a white sheet of paper, the logo in the middle, say, here's your new logo, do you like it? What you do is you apply it to different examples. It's like you show it on a shopping bag, or you show it on a poster, or you show it on the side of a bus, depending on what the project is. And you can do that using Photoshop mock-ups to make it look really real and cool. Hope that makes sense. Here's an example. Okay, right, so top left, the design agency here is rebranded, a brand called Clear, which is a tech watch, I think. Okay, so this is kind of and in a simplest form is what they've designed. They've designed a brand, they've designed a new logo, some headline styling, and a little kind of graphic ident. Using, so none of these images here are real. Yeah, these are all mock-ups. They then applied the branding to different situations, partly to show that the big brand idea works, and it works with photography styling. They would also create different color schemes, right? Your brand colors are blue, white, silver, and a bit of green. Okay, these are your brand colors. The designer makes that decision. And here it is applied on a mobile. So clearly nowadays, 40 to 50% of us view all new web content on a phone, not on a website. So you need to prove that the design idea works on mobile phone. It's usually a good idea. I've had some fun here putting it on fly posters just to make it look cool, I guess. And also on the left here, all kind of daily reality stuff of working in business. You'll need business, this company needs business cards or brochures and envelopes, that kind of thing. Yeah. So partly it shows that it's a flexible design. It can work in different scenarios. And also, to be honest with you, if you are showing it to a client, it's a really good way of selling it in. Okay, it makes it look really cool and sexy, and wow, look at my brand, it's out there in the real world. It's a really good thing to do. Okay, that was the final slide, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Now on to Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think it was really insightful for our attendees, and thanks everyone for attending, for your time. Now I will quickly go through the questions if there is any, and then we can end our masterclass. So we had some compliments about your rebranding, about your nanny's case. So our attendees loved your case, and they are writing us that they would buy it after rebranding process. We have also here the comment from Bella that she also really liked your redesign. Cool. So thank you. And here we have some technical questions also about the enrollment process of your graphic design courses. And I can say here that it's really pretty easy. I will just drop our website also here, and just clicking on the button, buy the course. It's pretty easy to buy our graphic design course, but before purchasing the courses, if there will be any questions, just feel free to book a call. This button is a site on our website as well, so we can just manage a quick introduction call, and it's like very easy and simple process. And like I will check again our chat. Yes, could you share the details of the course in a document? Yes, sure, we can share everything. Please just drop your email here and we can share the syllabus, we can share the start dates and fee and everything. Chris, would you be open to connecting on LinkedIn? So I'd love to get your feedback on my web portfolio to better appeal to agencies. This is the question to you, Chris.
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I can't remember what my exact LinkedIn thing is at the moment, but yeah, sure. You can find me. I am on there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And one question. Yeah, we have, I think that's all the questions for today. Thank you. We will wait for your email, Tingui, and we'll share all the information. Just drop it here. And as soon as we finish the masterclass, you will get all the details about the graphic design. So I think these were the all questions for today. So thank you once again for attending our graphic design masterclass. I think that it was very informative, engaging, and valuable for you. We're planning our masterclasses as well for upcoming days, so stay tuned and follow our social media pages, and you will be get updated information on daily basis. And thank you for trusting us, and hope to see you on our graphic design short courses with Chris Allen, and wish you a creative journey with us and not stop pursuing your goals and dreams. And thanks once again for spending your evening with us. Thank you all.
Cheers, guys. Great stuff. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.